to get started tonight. Tonight we have the wonderful Chris Weber with us again from down in Sarasota, drove all that way up. We have several people who actually made it here from quite a ways away. So Travis is in the back. That's the person's name whose name I completely forgot today when I walked in. We have Greg, Jeff, Dave, Danielle, Rick, Elaine, Tom, Joy, and myself. So without any further ado, we're going to get started and let Chris have his conversation. Enjoy.
Thanks, Jim. Anyway, I think I've seen most of y'all before. Tonight we're going to go over something a little bit different, more security. Last time it wasn't security. I got to remember which meetup I talk security these days and which ones I talk other things. So this is a little bit different than last time I was here in March. The slides are online for this already. If you want to follow along, download them, anything like that, it's cfw.bz/Tampa Word, TWP for Tampa WordPress Meetup 0717. So they'll pop up at the end as well. So a little bit about me for those who haven't met. I'm a developer over at UF Health. I'm a remote developer for the Shands Hospital, a core contributor. I've worked for companies such as 10up. I've worked for iThemes. I built one of the bigger security plugins in WordPress before I sold it to iThemes. And all kinds of, I've been around the WordPress ecosystem for a few years now, and background before that doing other stuff. So this is actually career number 3 or 4 after I was an airline captain at IT. I tried to make it as a musician, so this one's kind of stuck, which has been kind of nice, I think. But so tonight, though, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Like I said, a little bit more advanced. Feel free to ask questions as I go through if you have any questions. And we're going to talk about security and vulnerability specific. We're going to talk about vulnerabilities specific to what's going on with WordPress. So really, not so much the ones that affect WordPress the most, I guess is the best way to say this. And in order to identify the vulnerabilities we're going to talk about, I want to first talk about who, this isn't just something I'm pulling out of the air. I didn't just go to a book and say, well, this looks like the most popular one. There's actually an organization called OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security Project, minus the extra line break I put in there by mistake now that I'm seeing it. What they do is every 3 years they come up with a top 10 web application security risks for all web applications, whether you're PHP, whether you're WordPress, whether you're .NET Nuke and other things. It's basically the top 10 vulnerabilities that affect the web as a whole. It's just updated every 3 years, sort of. The last one was in 2013, and then since the project had started, they missed one last year. They might actually release the update this month or next month. It goes to release candidate, I think this week or next week. So we're waiting on an update of that one. So these are slightly old, but most of them really do still apply. From what I've seen of the drafts, the new list does not change all that much. So they're not specific to a language at all. It applies to all of them. And OWASP.org is probably your best bet to start it. I've listed the whole URL here if you want to find the top 10 project yourself. However, you can find it pretty easy. Just OWASP top 10 is a quick way to get to them. Now these deal with, like I said, they deal with every language, and they deal with a couple different parts. They deal with code, they deal with the servers themselves, and then they deal with general vulnerabilities, mistakes people make, human factors, different types of things other than just forgetting to sanitize or screwing up something in your functions.php files. These really do kind of encompass a lot of different types of vulnerabilities that target various different things. They'll target the server and application. They'll target the sites themselves. They'll target the user and the user's computer or browser. And really this is split up on one of two ways. Either they're trying to get into somebody's database and steal information, or they're trying to get at the end user. So it's really server and application or the end user that they're trying to get at. It's one side or the other. We can go to a whole other talk about what types of things they'll want to do when they get into some of that stuff. That's kind of beyond the scope of tonight. But really, all these vulnerabilities you'll see here in this talk are going to talk about one of those two things. Either they're targeting WordPress, they're targeting WordPress's server, or they're most likely targeting the user that's coming to your WordPress site, or some combination of both of the two. So let's talk about the ones that are specific to WordPress, or really not, I would say specific, the ones that are most prevalent. If you were to go into Security's blog and some of the bigger security blogs, you'll see an awful lot of repeats of some of these terms. things like XSS or CSRF or injection or whatever it might be, data exposure. You're going to see a lot of these terms over and over, and that's kind of how I picked these. When you go back to the OWASP's website, they list these in a specific order by what's the worst, or what's the most prevalent, or what's the least prevalent of the 10. I have changed that up a little bit for what I've seen most in WordPress after talking with companies like Securi and having worked with this myself. So we're going to talk about sensitive data exposure, security misconfiguration, injection, cross-site scripting, an object reference issue, function level access control, and CSRF. Notice there's not 10. There are a few more in the list. I've left them off because WordPress does some nice things for you in that there are a few things in that list that really, unless you're really doing something crazy, probably won't apply to you. So we've just kind of left them off. So that's not a typo on that. I've picked 7 out of these 10 that we'll kind of talk over tonight. Starting with sensitive data exposure. This is really also the most common outcome. It's not just a vulnerability, it's also the most common outcome of many of the vulnerabilities you're going to see. And it's failure to properly encrypt or otherwise protect sensitive data. It's just that simple. Typically, they're going after the application or the server, and there's a really high risk to this. It might just be something as simple as contact forms that expose your users' email addresses. It might be something much more complex if you're in an e-commerce store, order, the complete list of orders that the store has had, or what a user's bought, maybe the user's home address. These can go very severe, or these can go very simple. Oftentimes, WordPress gets dinged because if you go to an author page, their username is used to create the author page by default. There's been debate about whether or not that's a security vulnerability, whether or not that's sensitive data exposure. Is the username for your WordPress account protected data? WordPress doesn't think so. Others would disagree with that, but that's how simple some of these types of data, this type of data exposure can get. If this says difficulty to exploit, difficult, and I put an asterisk by it. Some of these aren't difficult to exploit at all. How many times do some of these, you hit a website with an error message? I've seen this happen before, and the error message lists maybe the last few users' email, or somebody hit it before you. Or somebody's really screwed up their cache in, you hit their website, and all of a sudden it's still logged in as somebody else. These types of things happen more with WordPress than a lot of other systems, just because of the nature of how people set their sites up. So I wouldn't say that these are all that difficult to exploit. Oftentimes, sensitive data exposure is exploited just by accident. Now, when it's talking about sensitive data, why it's saying it's difficult, these are the people that want to go in and steal your whole database. They know you've got a database of 40,000 emails. They want the whole thing, so they're going to target you to try to get those emails out. That might be a lot more difficult to go ahead and get. But that's not the only type of data exposure that we can talk about. This one, like I say, really does encompass all of these. Because really what it comes down to is trust between your users. Whether you have a blog, or you have e-commerce, or you have something else, the trust between your users is paramount. If you expose any of their data, whether it's just their email address, whether it's that they've been to that site in some way, their privacy, you've broken their trust with that privacy law, you've broken trust with something else, you've given away data that they thought only you were going to have, this becomes a big deal. It might be something like if you don't have SSL on your site and somebody's browsing your site in a coffee shop and has their stuff intercepted. Everything's intercepted over the air. Without SSL on your site, and somebody's sitting in Starbucks or somewhere with Wi-Fi, an open Wi-Fi connection, it's possible oftentimes to just go and pick all that data right out of the air. That's a sensitive data exposure at that point. So there's a lot of ways that this can be looked at, and it's something that really has to be taken into account. This is the end result, in most cases, of pretty much everything else we're going to talk about. And then the next one, and something that really, whether you code or not, that's really going to affect WordPress, is actually something as simple as security misconfiguration. A misconfiguration at any level of the stack, the server, the application, etc., that can lead to a compromise. And this is something usually where they may be trying to get a hold of the application of the server. This says moderate risk. This can be a pretty severe risk in WordPress. This can be as simple as if you're working on a client site, that little button under this says make this site private, or let search engines index this site, or turn that off. Their dev site winds up on Google search listings. Maybe it winds up just in the public as a whole, and it wasn't supposed to. That could be a pretty serious risk in a lot of cases. but it's as much as a simple checkbox. And how many other things are there in the WordPress dashboard where this can be a problem? Comment moderation. You know, if you're not supposed to have comments on a website, you accidentally turn on, click allow comments on this post. Yoast SEO, if anybody, I'm sure most of y'all use Yoast SEO in WordPress. The wrong allowance of that advanced meta box that they put that you can change all kinds of things with a post. Maybe you don't want your users to have that and you've forgotten to turn it off. That's how simple these security misconfigurations can be. On the deep end of this, there's ways you can do this on the server if, when you configure PHP itself or Nginx or Apache or whatever you use. A misconfiguration there can expose just about everything. So this can really go quite a different ways.
Is this the SEO?
It's WordPress, yeah.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Keep going.
Don't worry, just wait until it stops rolling.
Thank you. That's right.
I guess I did start a little too early, so I apologize. But this can cover a lot of different.
We'll shift this over.
It's easy to figure out.
This can cover a lot of different levels. It can cover the server, it can cover WordPress, it can cover something as simple as one of the plugins you install. If you install a plugin that prevents, I forget what it's called, TenUp has a plugin that prevents users from seeing a site in staging. You go out to production, you leave that plugin in, that's a security misconfiguration. These are very simple mistakes that we all make. One of the biggest computer manufacturers in the world, there's not many of them in here, but one of the big operating system manufacturers, I was working on one of their sites last year. I wasn't told that Jetpack was connected, so I was told pull down the database. I pulled down the database. It had Jetpack. Jetpack has a couple different ways you can prevent things from happening, but this site I wasn't even told was supposed to have it. Somebody had mentioned that it's not turned on in this database you're getting. What's the first thing I did was a test post. Thank God I only used test post and not anything funny in the title because it went right out to Microsoft's main Twitter account. Security misconfiguration. We've all made mistakes like that. It happens. That's really as simple as this stuff can be, or it can be very complex. Something like that's easy to fix. Yes, people get angry, things like that, but it's very easy to fix. Some of this stuff is not so easy to fix, so it's something to watch out for. But those are the two that you see. A security misconfiguration doesn't matter who's on it. It can be the simplest of user, it can be the highest of admins for your site. Some of these other things then get to be a little bit fancier. The first one I often talk about is injection, because you hear about this one the most. And injection is simply running code that it's not supposed to be run. There's cartoons on this. You hear about this with databases a lot. They put a semicolon in a database command and say drop all the tables, or delete this, or insert that. That's SQL injection, and it's a very common way of doing that. But it's really any code. The whole emoji thing with WordPress 4.2. There's a video on LoopConf, he spent an hour explaining why there are emojis in WordPress 4.2. It's to defeat what becomes an injection attack. Bless you. Long story short, the way the database works, it was allowed, there's ways you could trick the database into, if you leave a couple of comments in a row, you could run JavaScript across those comments and run whatever you wanted to do. Emojis was just a byproduct of the fix to the database. But it's a type of injection attack, and some of these can get extremely complex. That particular one, if I remember correctly, they spent 18 months trying to fix because of its complexity. How much data is in everybody's WordPress databases? You can't hit update and risk that going away. So it becomes pretty crazy at that point. Of course, these oftentimes, this is a rule of thumb, they're going after the application and the server, for the simple fact that they're trying to run code on the application and the server. And these can be very severe. Delete all the tables in the database. Add an extra user to your WordPress. Add a new admin maybe to your WordPress. The Tim Thumb issue. We all remember Tim Thumb a couple of years back, or anybody who's working with WordPress. One of the first really big compromises of WordPress was a file called Tim Thumb. And really what it was supposed to do is it took PHP and it just modified your images for you. It was supposed to save time, shrink the images, that type of thing. But it could run anything. You could pass just about anything to it, and it would run the commands. So people would lose their entire servers because this TimThumb vulnerability, which was an injection vulnerability, allowed people to run any code they want and completely take over the server very quickly. If you ever do a hacking type course, one of the first things they have you do is if you do some of the WordPress-centric ones that people have out there, is take over a server through the WordPress. Can you run what they call a shell? You know, a shell is as simple as anybody who has a Mac. When you pull up terminal, that's a shell. You're running commands directly on the machine. There's many vulnerabilities out there with WordPress, where you can get a shell running on the machine just through WordPress. Older versions, it's the plugins, and this isn't to say WordPress isn't secure, it's just that there's been vulnerabilities throughout time, and this is a type of what injection does. Very easy to exploit when you know what happens. TimThumb, they botted it. In other words, they automated it. They ran bots on this thing that just looked for TimThumb files there, run some code against it, boom, they own your own server, you can do thousands of them in an hour. Very easy to exploit. They didn't even have to know you had TimThumb installed. Just went to every domain looking for everything that they knew that had TimThumb and trying to ping at the file. Because they know it's WP/content, most likely. They know it's /themes. They know the theme name. Real easy to go ahead and try to get that type of thing. So these can be very easy to exploit once they're known. And they can lead to all kinds of problems. Data corruption, data exposure, host hog, your host completely owned. So you got quite the range.
Sorry, I think there are chairs. Hang on a second.
There was one chair.
One more chair.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's the worst thing that happens then. It's not a bad day.
I can sit up front, that's fine.
Might have to go to the far edge.
That's fine.
Okay. Oh, I didn't even see that one back there.
Oh, no, I can sit there? Don't we have extra chairs? Okay, thank you.
Two more chairs. We'll get that back. More musical chairs. Go ahead.
From a code point of view, and I promised Jim I would take as much actual code out of this as I could. That's okay. It's as simple as a very, WordPress, if you ever look at the database, like look at the raw database, it has, most of the data is in like squirrely brackets and it has maybe like S and a colon and a number and then all kinds of data. And if you try to edit anything, your whole site goes kaput. It's what they call serialized data. It's just a data format, kind of like CSV. We've all seen CSV files. WordPress uses serialized data in a database. PHP has a really neat function called unserialize. Take that serialized data, turn it back into an object. A lot of plugins will use it. The catch is it'll run any code passed to it. It runs very specific code that's core to PHP, what they call constructors and wake and sleep methods and what they call magic methods. It'll run for it. So what the problem with this is there's plugins out there. And last I looked, there's a really major plugin that uses this as a feature. It passes serialized data from one server to another. So if I know what that server is on the target, the only thing it does is it checks in the string to say, hey, is the plugin name present? Plugin name's present, run whatever you want. There's a lot of that out there. It's an injection vulnerability. It's quite common. And in some ways, it's a feature of PHP. Nowadays, you hear about JSON. You guys all heard of the REST API that they're talking about. Completely makes this obsolete in most instances. Database still has everything serialized, but there should never be a reason to transfer data, so you don't see this too often, which is why you don't hear about it more when you look at a lot of the vulnerabilities, a lot of the WordPress news going on there. What you do hear of a lot of is something like this, cross-site scripting. User-supplied data is sent to the browser without validation. Most common vulnerability. WordPress is absolutely infamous for this. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Partially, let's talk about what it is a little bit more first. It's going after the user now. You're taking somebody's, something somebody gave to you and spitting back out comments, running something in the comments that maybe shouldn't have been there, whatever it might be. You're taking data that shouldn't be displayed back and simply displaying it back is all this means. This says moderate risk. This type of thing can actually can really cause problems with the advent of JavaScript. If what you put in is JavaScript and it spits that back out to the user, you can run quite a bit of code in this type of thing. So I put another asterisk, but pretty much all these have asterisks next to potential risk because it really depends on how they're used. Difficulty to exploit average. I'll actually disagree with that one a little bit in WordPress, and I'll say why in a second. And the outcomes, browser hijack, deface website, redirect user, etc. I mean, this says moderate risk, and then it lists basically take over your website. That seems like a pretty serious risk even in its own description. But that's what it's talking about. It could be something as simple as get in WordPress, when you see a URL and you put the question mark in it, you say, variable equals something. That's what they call a get variable. So what this says is if a get variable is present, just echo it back out to the screen is what this is saying. That would be a classic cross-site scripting example. Something that you see a little bit less of, but could actually be has a real potential for problems in WordPress is a bottom one. This is completely valid code by WordPress. I-18N, or internationalization, this is how they tell you initially to do it. But who controls the language files that are being written back in? If you're accepting language files for translations of your plugin that aren't vetted, WordPress.org's done wonders of now that they host their own language files and everything for the plugins, and there is a lot more control over that. But commercial plugins and things that maybe host their own and take just recommendations from everybody, because I don't speak Chinese. Somebody gives me a Chinese translation, I ain't tested it. What would I do with it? What's in those files? There's ways to write that function that can actually take care of the problem there. It'll state the content out. But just going ahead and running a straight translation and then accepting translation files from somebody can cause you just as much problems as some of these other things. And it's not something you hear about all that often. Like I said earlier, WordPress, this is extremely prevalent. There's a couple of reasons. One of the biggest is just experience levels oftentimes of WordPress users and WordPress developers. WordPress is super easy to get into. I wrote one of the largest security plugins in WordPress with almost no programming experience at all whatsoever. I was a student doing it on the side. I guarantee you that there were some issues in that plugin, as there are in all these big plugins, because an awful lot of people, a lot of the bigger plugins today, started out in a very similar way. We all started in as side projects or something like that. And oftentimes they were, in my case, it was a resume. I was working on a computer science degree, so the idea was simply to just have something I could show. But I had no idea best practices in PHP. And you see that oftentimes with WordPress. You see that time and time again, really. The themes directory, they've really locked down. Nowadays, if you submit a theme, I hear it can take, I've heard people say their themes, when they submit them to WordPress.org, can take up to 1.5 years to get approved. Because they've really cut down on that theme directory. The plugins, not so much. They run some automated tests. People download plugins on GitHub all the time and other sources where they're not vetted at all. So it's really, this isn't a knock on WordPress itself. This is a knock on, do you trust the developer that's writing it for you? And in some cases, the plugin, like the plugin I wrote, there's code in that thing still. iTheme Security, that's 6 years old and I wrote it. Fortunately, there's a lot better guys than me working on it these days, but who knows what some of that old code is. So it's just something that happens very commonly, or quite regularly, I should say. That's why they say keep updated. That's one of, even more so than Windows and some of these sometimes. I think WordPress is so important to keep updated. That's one of the big reasons why. It's a very low level of entry. 5, 6 years ago, the only way you could really make money on the site easy as a developer was WordPress, or the easiest way, I should say. Without the App Store notwithstanding, but App Store has a $99 barrier of entry. I could write that plugin, submit it to the repo, and after a couple hours, it looks like it works to me, and it's right in the repo. Start asking for donations with the thing. A lot of plugins really grew that route, that organic route, because there's almost no barrier to entry at all.
I have a question for you. If you got like developers working for you, I mean, it would be very easy for them to throw something like that in there, and then that's basically keeping a grip on their work. And if your relationship goes sour, they can very easily destroy things for you according to that. So how do you, what would be the best practice to kind of...
Well, WordPress for something like that, the malicious type of work like that, WordPress is this is a small industry. I mean, how many times do you see even just in tech in general, somebody tries some sort of backdoor and it's all over big tech news? That guy would never work again.
Right.
I mean, there has to be some level of trust. However, there are tools, and I'll get to them toward the end of this, some very specific tools to help clean up code that you can use to just ensure code quality, and really takes a lot of this risk out of it. But cross-site, like I said, cross-site scripting is really, you're just running data back to the user that shouldn't have been. It's a very simple type of attack. It's an easy attack to create, or an easy vulnerability to create with a mistake, is what it comes down to. Next one in there then is insecure direct object references. This is simply use of a key or name to request an object where the object does not verify the requester's access permission. Well, that's pretty basic. They're going after the application of the server. This is another type of thing that, depending on how things are coded, it can be a very important risk. If you're doing a transaction and you don't protect the transaction ID, and they can run something on there and say, hey, pull in the whole list of credit cards, maybe you have an array of credit cards that somebody saved or something like that. You haven't protected that data. All they have to do is change something to pull it. It would be very easy to get that back. Difficulty to exploit, very easy, and it's going to exploit sensitive data. Here's an example of it. Escape HTML looks great, right? Now we're trying to block against XSS attacks and things like that. But my WP user echoed get user key. What's the user key? Well, some of these plugins with their API keys and things like that, how do you access that back? Is there places in it where it was just exposed? Oftentimes you'll see this if a developer does this, it's typically because they were trying to troubleshoot. They were trying to debug their work. They put in, any of y'all who ever used the functions file, we've all done this, right? Echo whatever this is supposed to equal, and why doesn't it equal what it's supposed to, right? So you wind up with these debugging statements in there. That's why you see this type of thing happen quite often. And there's other ways for it to happen, but mostly if you're working in a functions file, you're working on a basic theme, that's where it would be real easy to make a mistake like this. Clean up your debugging code. Be careful, be very careful what you're testing for. If you're testing for something that is even remotely sensitive, make darn sure that it's not in there later. And there's tools, again, like we mentioned earlier with some of the tools before, there's tools that can help make this a lot easier. But in WordPress, because of the nature of how many of us get into this type of programming, that's when you're going to see insecure direct object reference code most prevalent. Similar to this is missing function level access control. This you'll actually see a lot, and it's more of an experience thing, but it's not so much because people are making mistakes. Some very big plugins have done this. Failure to verify access rights upon access to a specific function. Again, they're going after the server. I put an asterisk for moderate because maybe this is only, you have a site, you didn't want somebody to get a hold of the hidden page. You put a paywall up, and if you put a right kind of URL up there, you can get to it and they can get around your paywall. Whatever it might be, that's not necessarily the end of the world. Maybe it's your whole user list. I've actually seen this happen with somebody's user lists where the developer wanted to give them basically a report. The person didn't want to log in, so you just go to the right URL. Now you got a list of everybody's information. That's the type of thing that you don't see as much of anymore, but it does happen. In WordPress, the way you tend to see this is something a little bit different, is admin. And if you ever go searching for WordPress vulnerabilities, you'll see this a lot. All is admin says is, are you in the dashboard? Are you logged in? Don't care. It couldn't care less what your permission level is, what your user level is. But new developers, what's the first thing? Well, this should be this should be a dashboard only. So now we're going to get smart. We're going to check to make sure they're in the dashboard. So we write is admin into the thing. But we're not checking to see if the user actually has the permission you want them to have. That's where you see this a lot of times in WordPress. Very simple to do. Again, it's something that you'll often see in functions.php. You're working with, you're trying to do something, some sort of theme setting maybe, or something else that you want to display if only the user's logged in type of thing. These types of checks, because you have to kind of combine checks in WordPress, can get you in trouble really quick. So watch how those functions work is really what this comes down to. There's a current user can function in WordPress. That's what tells you if the current user has the rights to do a certain thing. That's how you would fix this. Just saying if it is admin, all that says is the file that the location they're coming into your WordPress URL has WP admin in it. As long as WP admin's in there, is admin will always return true. And that's really all that amounts to. But you see an awful lot of people try to use it as verification that the user's an admin or something similar to that. So it's just something to watch out for. Another big one in WordPress, which is another type of injection attack, is a cross-site request forgery. Forges a logged-on victim browser to send a forged HTTP request to a vulnerable web application. May include cookie data or something else. In other words, how many times have you got stuck in WordPress, you tell the user to clear their cookies, right? Well, cookies, we've all seen this stuff with Facebook. We've all seen this Google. You know, you go Google a new computer. Next time you're on Facebook, you're getting ads for the new computer. Cookies can be pulled in not just from the site that they're set on. Cookies are pieces of data that the server saves about you. And anybody who visits, if that cookie's read right, can just read that data back into the other side. So what a CSRF attack is it's embedding something in your site that's going to read, maybe it's reading your user's login cookie. Maybe it's reading some other type of user information and sending it back to the user or to the attacker. Maybe it's simply just recording that your user was there for you. They're going after, instead of where it is XSS and things like that, they're often going after the attacker or the server itself and a piece of software. Here they're often going after the person, your actual user. That whole thing about where we're trying to maintain trust. This is one of the types of attacks that can really break it pretty quickly. Again, it says potential risk is moderate, but what if that cookie has financial data in it? What if their password that they set on your simple WordPress site is the same password that they use for their bank? And now they were, depending on how the cookies, WordPress encodes passwords, so that would be a really long shot. You would really have to try to actually pull somebody's password doing it this way. But if you're working outside of WordPress, you can't see this type of thing happen. Difficulty to exploit average and data corruption or sensitive data exposure. Now I say things like WordPress is very good at passwords. It really is. Trust WordPress's password encryption and things like that. Adobe a few years back had a big deal. They had, going back from when Macromedia and early Adobe and everything else was around, as they combined all those companies, they mixed all the users into one single password database and they used it self-encryption. Well, to this day, if you Google Adobe crossword puzzle, they have crossword puzzle of the 10,000, I think it is, most used passwords on Adobe. Because in plain text in the same table were their password hints. And all this, the variable length and the type of encryption they used didn't take long at all when you start putting with password hints and figure out, okay, clearly this guy's using this word, start combining it with other pieces of encryption, and you can reverse their whole database pretty quickly. I say if you Google the Adobe password crossword puzzle, you can play crosswords with, I think it's 10,000 different Adobe passwords people were using. Not quite as similar as they didn't get that through a CSRF attack. They got into this person's server. But I want to illustrate that WordPress, if you were to pull that whole password database back, you'd get very little out of it. In WP config, you have that salt variable. You've seen those things, right? Those 6 geared lines in your WP config file that have a whole bunch of characters on them. Between the way, WordPress uses very standardized ways, what they call hashing. They don't encrypt. They hash your password. Difference being, a hash is one way. Once I create a hash, I can never, in theory, get it back out. Encryption is designed to be two-way. When I encrypt my Signal or iMessage, the idea of when we talk about privacy and messaging, we want to be able to send the message, but the person on the other side still has to read it. That's encryption. When I want to store something and I never need to know what it is again, that's hashing. WordPress hashes, and they use some very strong algorithms to do it. So this, like I said, I want to make sure I explain this well with WordPress passwords because it tends to be really confusing. In other words, trust what WordPress is doing with things like CSRF, and that type of data typically is not available. WordPress keeps it hidden. Types of data that can be available are typically things like if you have a store that you're trying to record a person's state, what they're doing from page to page, and you're doing it with a cookie. That could get you in trouble. Or something as simple as they put an image on there. Well, an image in the comments. Think of Google Analytics or WordPress.com analytics or some of these other things, that as soon as you download the file, they have your IP address, where you're at, they can get all kinds of information just as you use these images. In fact, WordPress.com stats used to be famous. They had the little smiley face right in the bottom of WordPress if you didn't erase it. The whole point of that smiley face was they recorded everything about who you are and where you're coming from just using that little image. So now if an attacker site wants to know who your users are, where your users are coming from, what your users are doing, the right image in the right spot on your site could do nothing more than just record their IP addresses and who they are, what they're doing. That's still a CSRF attack. Just a vulnerable image or a bad image, sending data that those users don't want sent back to the wrong server. Just using straight, they might use straight Google Analytics on it. It doesn't take much to record this stuff. But every time Chrome or Safari or whatever you use says, hey, do you want to know where, can you allow me to see where you're at? And it tells you puts you right in the part of your house that you're sitting in. Think about that if this is a site you trust and you told them you know where you're at, now you're sending all that data back to somebody else who can get it too. That stuff can get you that can break a user's trust very quickly. So the CSRF stuff doesn't have to be fancy. In WordPress, if you see it in the wild, it's probably they're trying to steal somebody's credentials, or they're trying to steal other things. Firefox used to have a browser extension called Firesheet. This wasn't quite CSRF because it wasn't using code. It tried to pull this data straight out of the air over empty Wi-Fi, and then everybody went to SSL and started encrypting all their data. But it's the same type of process where we're just trying to pull data. Only this time we're trying to pull it out of your browser. Like I say, WordPress is, if you're doing it right, it shouldn't have too much. Your bigger issue is people just recording your user, violating your user's privacy. Does that make sense? Those are the 7. That's a fire hose of 7. Is there any questions on those before I move on to a couple of much easier topics? Okay. So some protection strategies. The biggest ones, keep up to date. More than anything else in WordPress is keep up to date. One of the downsides of WordPress is if you don't keep up to date, any vulnerability found, Tommy here a few minutes ago mentioned that the other day one of the big 300,000 installed plugins has an injection vulnerability. Typically, these people that are finding these things love the glory, so they'll actually they'll publish for you what the vulnerability is and sample code on how to exploit it. If you're not up to date, all it is somebody making a little bot that can go out and get it real quickly. That's what happened with Tim Thumb. That's happened with others. There's been MailPoet had a lot of issues with a very similar type of thing. There's a whole concept of ethical disclosure when it comes to security. In other words, when do you tell the public that something was wrong? Because we should know, right? We're site owners. We should know that there's a problem with the code we're using. Some people don't believe that they need to wait at all. As soon as they know it, they release it to the wild. Maybe they didn't even tell the developer. That causes a problem. Oftentimes, there's depending on what project you're working with and what team you're working with, they may say, hey, wait a week, we'll release it for you. We're going to make that transparency happen. Whatever it might be, but once that comes out, if you're not updated, you're in trouble. So keeping up to date really is by far the #1 thing you can do. And I know you hear this from the most basic of security talks to the most advanced, but it really does make a difference. Another big one in WordPress that people don't seem to do as much is review your WordPress dashboard periodically. Well, I haven't changed any settings in my site in 6 months. Well, what new versions have come out? What new settings have come out? What settings have changed? Do you even know necessarily what all those settings were? Well, maybe you turned something on a few months ago to test it and kind of forgot about it. I'm guilty of this all the time when I'm experimenting. Review those settings. By default, there's 7 pages of settings, and there's really not a whole lot there. But going through them, it's amazing how many times you'll find and go, oh, I wasn't supposed to have that on. Or I should have turned that on. I wonder how I even got to my site. The whole security misconfiguration thing, you just covered it pretty much right there as a WordPress admin. Now, if you're a server admin, that gets a little bit fancier, but as just a WordPress site administrator working with your clients, that takes care of an awful lot of it. The next think my battery's starting to go. Next one's use coding standards as you're doing this stuff. Whether you're doing functions.php or you're doing something stronger, this is what I was talking to you about earlier. You want to use coding standards. WordPress is a very good set of standards. There's a tool out there called PHP Code Sniffer. It's what they call a linter. This is, think of when you're typing in Word or when you're typing in the WordPress dashboard and it starts highlighting every word that you've misspelled on you and all the grammatical mistakes and everything. This is the same thing for code. And you can combine it with the WordPress coding standards itself. And then regard whatever editor you have, or just simply if you're using Git. Most people do use Git now for keeping track of their code. WP Enforcer, when you try to save your code in Git, it'll go through and look at every line of code for WordPress coding standards violations. And it'll flag them, and it won't let you actually save the work that way. Very handy project. And this is looking at things like it'll tell you every line that you have where you use one of those Git variables, where you use one of the post variables, didn't check it right. In fact, there's a couple different types of checks you need to have to put on each line in order to get through it. Otherwise it'll say, do you need to manually inspect this variable is one of the checks it'll do. It'll say sanitization error. It'll say a validation error. It'll give you a WP error. All these errors on each line of code, and it'll tell you that you caught them. So all that XSS stuff, a lot of the CSRS stuff, a lot of the injection stuff, just by using coding standards, is going to go away for you pretty quickly. Those are great if you know how to use them. And this is one of the biggest things I see with people with code, especially in WordPress, is know your editor. I don't really care if you use Dreamweaver, Notepad++, TextEdit, PHP Storm, Sublime Text, how many out there? I mean, God, there's so many of these things out there these days. But if you know how it works, many of them, Sublime Text, Atom, both Atom's completely free, PHP Storm, all this stuff has a lot of these features built in. PHP Code Sniffer can be built in or used directly with what you have. Then there's other types of tests that you can run on it very similar ways to start flagging this code as it happens. In the case of all three of them too, Sublime, Atom, and PHP Storm, all these mistakes that you can make by leaving a debugging thing in there, that whole echo, what did I have here at this point? There's what they call breakpoint debuggers. In PHP, it's called Xdebug. In other words, I put a dot next to the line I wanted to stop at, code stops, and my editor spits back out every single variable that can see at that point what it's worth. Array, all the fancy ones, all the post variables, all the get variables. I never have to write any echo this or bar dump that or whatever the typical stuff that you're going to see. Knowing that, and this isn't fancy code that I'm doing at all. This is simply knowing how my editor works. I do use PHP Storm myself because, frankly, I'm really lazy when it comes to some of these editors, and I don't want to spend 6 hours configuring Sublime Text or Atom with all the packages and 17 tutorials. PHP Storm has pretty much all of this built in, and many of the MAMPs, many of the XAMPs, variant vagrants, primary vagrants, code, or what's it called, flywheel, local by flywheel, all this stuff has all these tools built into them. So whichever server thing you're using to try to test locally probably already has all these debugging tools. If you know your editor well enough, you're covered. Maybe that's maybe an editor setup's probably another talk, but it is a really overlooked aspect. I know so many devs are like shiny and new, and then they switch editors every few months. I know some guys who seem to switch them even more often. And without a doubt, I can almost guarantee you that at the end of the day, they have more problems with their code. That's not to say that their code's going to be bad, but they spend more time trying to get through simple coding errors than somebody who really knows what their tools are, simply because the tools will check it for you if you set them up right. And that's also use available tools. So this is not necessarily code either, but use other things that are out there. Jetpack is great at blocking different types of attacks on your site. Jetpack can actually enforce two-factor on your site with WordPress.com. On my own personal site, there's no local login to it. The whole WordPress login page is completely gone. It's really easy to set up with Jetpack. You have to be logged in with WordPress.com, and you have to have two-factor in an account on my site. So now I've enforced the two-factor, the whole, what your bank sends you, the text message thing, WordPress.com has that built in. Plus, instead of somebody trying to brute force and trying every password combination on my own site, now they're trying it on WordPress.com. guarantee you they have a little bit stronger security on their login page than I can possibly put on mine. So Jetpack's a great tool to be able to do that. Spam bots with Akismet that comes kind of connected to Jetpack is another part of that package. We're taking care of spam. Spam can very easily lead to things like XSS and CSRF attacks. What's being displayed back to your users? Eliminate a lot of the spam and it takes care of it for you. If you have control over your own server, fail to ban's a great thing. Fail to ban takes all the guesswork of too many bad logins off of WordPress and puts them in the server and then blocks the user before they even get to WordPress. It's a poor man's version of what WordPress.com and a lot of these fancier services use in order to block bad login attempts. Security. They put a whole firewall in front of your site and they give you what basically amounts to insurance. So if something does go wrong, they can help clean it up for you. Security, if any of you guys have been to any of the WordCamps, you probably heard security's name before. They're pretty much everywhere in WordPress. Google Webmaster Tools. This is that whole search console thing. If you do anything with SEO, they're going to tell you to submit your sitemap to Google. Well, that also does a lot of things for security. Namely, it watches things for you. When there's a problem, it emails you, hey, there's something wrong with your site's SSL certificate. Your malware on your site. Something else is wrong here, or something else is wrong there. That's a great security tool to be able to detect when something goes wrong and be able to fix it. Let'sEncrypt.org. I mentioned earlier things like Firesheep and being able to pull passwords and that information out of the air. Let's Encrypt is a free SSL certificate. So there's almost no excuse not to have it. Your host may charge you extra to implement it, but the certificates that used to cost anywhere from $10 to $100 are now free. So that'll take care of anybody being able to eavesdrop on your user while they're using your site. If you have a site, maybe it's a sensitive topic, some sort of health topic, and somebody in Starbucks is having their connection spied upon, they don't want anybody else knowing they're browsing your sensitive health topic. That's a violation of their privacy. That's a vulnerability. So something like Let's Encrypt would stop that almost completely for free. They might still know they're coming to your site, but not exactly what content they're pulling out of it. If you have SSL, sslabs.com/SSL test, I'll tell you how good it is. Did you configure it right? Just like anything else, you can install WordPress, and you never touch a configuration option. Maybe everything works for you, maybe it doesn't. But it's all those options that we start changing to create our security misconfiguration. SSL is the same way. There's a lot of configuration options. And observatory.mozilla.org is another one. It'll scan your whole site for security. I'd be willing to bet, I'll buy the first beer if anybody out here gets above an F on it for their own personal site.
Nice.
Very, very few sites that I see can go above an F on it. That thing's very strict, but it has some really good points. Just various simple headers that you can put in that can return, that can protect your users from various things. All kinds of little just fairly simple tricks that if you have access to htaccess, the htaccess file that your WordPress rewrites go in, you can block all kinds of things, and you can really improve your users' security and your users' privacy just with what Observatory has. So, I mean, these aren't code. These are simple, security.net. Putting a firewall on a thing is one of the probably best things you can do. You're blocking an attacker. You're blocking a problem before it even gets to your server, much less gets to your user. And of course, at some point, this is all going to fail. It's just the nature of security. So having and verifying a backup, they always tell you have a backup. A backup does nothing when it doesn't work, and that's probably 60% of the backups. It's like, well, I took a backup. Yeah, but your server stopped taking them 8 months ago. What? Verify the things and have a plan to deal with them. Other problem is, well, I have a backup. I don't know how to use it. Well, who normally sets your site up? Oh, he left months ago. Why don't you at least have somebody that you can call other than me and deal with this stuff? I'll charge you an hour and a leg to fix it, sure. But have a plan. Security is another great service for this because, like I said, they kind of offer something of an insurance. So if something goes wrong, there's your first line of recovery. Just give them a call and have them start to take care of the problem for you and mitigate it before it gets to your users. I mean, that's really what it amounts to, right? As soon as your users see that malware warning on your site, they're probably not coming back. So being able to respond quickly oftentimes with small blogs, personal blogs, small business websites type of thing, what kills users the most is that Google warning that's been on there for 3 days. All the trust of your users is gone. Even once you get rid of that, I'm not going to give you my email address again personally. I'm not going to buy something from that site again because I don't really trust that it's completely clean. Who cleaned it? I don't know. If I don't know what's happened, I'm just nice, dumb, and happy and going on and giving you my money. I mean, sure it was hacked, but that trust level wasn't broken because I simply didn't know about it. Speed is a big deal. So have a plan. Know who you're calling and who you're dealing with. I don't know how many of y'all are developers versus site admins versus whatever it is you're doing with your site, but having a plan appropriate for what your experience level is really all that comes down to. So that's, like I said, quite a fire hose, I realize, of information, but I will open it up to questions. We're too much of a fire hose if there's no questions.
Dead. Are they overwhelmed?
Full disclosure, I gave this talk, and Jim was there in Tampa 2 years ago, and I gave this with a second part, which was all code. I had a couple people leave in the middle. It was supposed to be the most advanced developer meetup. So he's like, well, let's keep it down and all this, and this is the advanced meetup. So I pulled out the whole code section to see how this would go. So I apologize. It was a little too advanced.
Yeah, Chris is up there.
Got an F.
No.
What's that?
Got an F.
Oh, he can check. Okay.
Anybody else try it?
No free beers for him.
I got a date.
On SSL test or this observatory? This observatory is the one out by the beer.
The big long one that takes 97% paying. I don't know.
Okay. I'll check, so I might owe you a beer here.
No, I thought
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you obviously you're in this area. Can you tell a quick story that would I don't know, kind of help somebody like me just avoid this situation altogether? You know, just kind of a few things you've learned, a few tricks.
I admit I'm not the best storyteller. That's why I typically give. I teach college. I was never an English major, but quite honestly, the best thing that I've ever done was settling on PHP Storm. And this isn't a sales pitch for PHP Storm. I settled on it. And I've stuck with it. Was the bigger thing. And the amount that's helped me is somebody throws in another tool. Here, you want to learn JS hint. Or I can throw out a half dozen different acronyms, but now I only have to learn that little piece. And maybe it's a linter for JavaScript and incorporating all that stuff in JavaScript. All these PHP things. Now I don't have to learn the rest of it. That has been probably one of the single best things is learning my tools as a developer. That's just so
do a course on PHP Storm for WordPress?
I'd be happy to come out and do a set of courses.
There's anybody anywhere that does. I mean, it is a really good tool, and I've got a developer's license for it, but I don't understand one fifth of it. And what I looked at online is there's not a lot of people that talk about using it with WordPress.
Sure.
Yeah, we had at the WordCamp last year that whole developer workshop that was happening in the back room on Sunday. That's all they talked about. It was PHP Storm, Xdebug, the whole bit.
Well, honestly, what that would be a Saturday, like either a half day or even a full day workshop.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to. And that's why it's always hard with a 1 hour meetup like this. Is where do you draw the line on some of this stuff?
Well, I mean, I looked at your talk that you did in Miami too, and that was more about securing.
Well, that was supposed to be a workshop. I pitched 5 talks. I pitched one of them that was workshop only, and they gave it a 10-minute lightning talk.
Oh my God, that's horrible. Yeah. So
that was really
yours is mostly like you're dealing with like client sites, right? That kind of thing. And so you're needing. I mean, you were talking about like you're shipping out code to external sources, right? Having other developers work on stuff. What for, like themes or
Just in general, anything. Plugins.
and stuff like that? Well, I mean, what I would do is establish some kind of code review. The open source community with WordPress is really very open. You just have to get in touch with other folks that are, pretty aware. And that's
Can easily spot some malicious stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is too, anything you possibly can, submit it back to .org or these places that really review the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, .org's gotten vicious with some of the stuff, especially themes. They'll knock you just for spacing stuff.
Well,
But that's the amount that you learn as people read some of this stuff.
What about the stuff like too on GitHub, the Travis CI stuff and all of those little,
See,
yeah.
what he's talking about, the GitHub itself can be set to automatically run all these tests on your code.
Yeah.
But that's a tool that if you're not understanding how the tool's working locally, to try to implement that becomes a whole, it's basically taking out the foundation and trying to build the roof.
Right.
It's great. The roof is going to protect you from a lot of things,
Yeah.
but you're not building it on the right knowledge base yet.
Well, I know inside, because we support a plugin with like 50,000 active installs, 500,000 downloads, stuff like that. So we have a code review process that goes. Like ours is all open source, so everything is on GitHub. But anytime someone submits a patch or correction, we have at least 2 developers that have to review that change. And that's kind of the process that you'd want to,
That's a really good point too. And I don't bring it up because where I'm at currently, this is actually something I'm trying to implement and running up against a lot of old practices because that's a hard paradigm to change. At Tenna, any code I committed had to go through somebody else. There were very few projects I touched where I was never allowed to touch master on my own commits. That's not to say, other people might have their own code. I could review it and send it to master. I could not send my own code to production. It had to come from somebody else. And in fact, when I was at Tenna, what a lot of the work I did was nothing but code reviews for giant companies. And as an agency, if you had a contract with them, your code would actually come through me. I'd review it and spit it back out for you. WordPress VIP is famous for this. Have you guys worked with WordPress VIP in this room? WordPress VIP is WordPress's enterprise level hosting. They're horribly vicious when it comes down to it. They'll tell you they don't like the way your logics run, even beyond like the security of things. We don't like how you did that. And then you go back and resubmit it, and they'll accept it. Then they'll come back the next day and flag the same piece of code and say, well, we want you to turn it back to the original way. I mean, because there's so many eyes on it with so many different. One guy might really be into security. One guy might really be into performance. There's just a whole lot of different ways people can look at it. You learn a lot. You'll be more frustrated than you've ever been in your life, but you will learn a lot through the process, that's for sure. And then even locally, having some sort of code review process, he's got a very good point. Just having, and it doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Once you learn the code sniffer tools and that, you can automate, the person that's accepting can automate a lot of this stuff.
Well, too, also, if you're like dealing with folks that are really heavy code based, and you guys are more front end based, maybe, or something like that, like you're really good front end, and they're more back end, do bartering. Like, have them, trade off and have them review your code, and you'll review their CSS and stuff like that, and help them out. And that's kind of the whole idea is like we're trying to build more of a community so that you guys will know more about who is out there doing that kind of coding and stuff like that. You can reach out for support of that nature.
All right, sounds great. Thank you.
So did it help? A little bit of help?
Yeah, that's a great idea, and definitely want to implement that. That's a major concern of mine. They can very easily make something, and then we ship the site out, and who knows what happens after that.
Yeah.
If they leave something.
And it depends too who you're going to, what companies you're going to for your external code work. Like Codable is incredibly good about, they do internal code review. They have, their own developers that are actually comparing projects and stuff like that. So they have a reputation to maintain, so they're not going to allow that kind of stuff to happen.
That's a very good point. Anybody else? So it looked like both of you were going at the same time, so go ahead.
I was just going to ask quickly about that the web address that you had up at the very beginning.
The slides?
Yeah.
There we go, sorry.
That'll be, I'll post that on the meetup as well.
Yeah,
Both of them.
we will make sure it's out there for you so you get all those links.
Yeah. Cool.
So, just today, I had a question for, and I never really contacted Blue Cross Blue Shield or Assure, but I had a question. I called, went through that whole rigmarole and got somebody on the phone, and then in the end they said, well, you need to go to our website and, check out your account. And I had never, registered on Blue Cross Blue Shield. So they said, well, hold on, and we'll put you right through to who you need to talk to. So they did that, and and they walked me through registering online. And I mean, all these secret things they verbally told me to do. I mean, it wasn't even on the registration page, the 8 characters. Oh, and don't use an exclamation point. And, you know, it has to have 1 capital letter. I mean, some of these things are typical, but why wouldn't they just post that?
My favorites are the ones that don't tell you and they have maximum. So I use 1Password, and I always generate a 64-character password.
Wow.
And it'll save it on everything. Or most sites will save it. Some of them, but a lot of them save it or tell you it saves it, but it actually truncates it. So
Oh my
you go to
God.
use it, you can't.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen that. You see that all the time with the security. It's a problem.
But I mean, I never had, the verbal instructions. You know, usually it's like, wrong, and they say why it's wrong.
Yeah.
It used to be 8 characters or 10 characters, but is that for security? Oh, and then when I finally registered, I'm expecting it to be like an account for my whole family. No, it's just me.
That's probably a good thing, though. I mean, from a security point of view,
super,
because you're
yeah.
sandboxing. Yeah.
Super secure, I guess they're super freaked out about the security.
Well, they have HIPAA laws that
Yeah.
are quite strict. Yeah, I work for Shands Hospital, so we deal with a lot of that on our systems.
Now, with all the cybersecurity things, the stuff that you don't hear about is they are the ones that are targeted more than any of the other ones are. The reason you don't hear about it is because the board of directors won't let them announce it because there'll be all kinds of lawsuits.
I've done that for a second. Yeah, I worked for a lot of banks back in the day with IT, and it's always.
I did Sarbanes-Oxley compliance audits,
Okay, yeah, so
which is right up there with HIPAA.
Yep. But anyway.
So,
Any other questions, though?
I have a question. The plan, you said have a plan. What kind of plan?
Oftentimes, quite honestly, what it's come down to is know who to call. If you're a developer, maybe it's something you can do yourself, and I usually, I have a checklist of things that I can do to fix a
That's
site.
kind of what I was getting to. What would you put on your checklist in that scenario?
Sure. First thing is, typically, my own checklist is make sure, do an audit. What plugins and themes do they have installed? Second step is get clean copies of every one of them. If I can't get a clean copy of the plugin or the theme, I can't clean the site for them. In other words, if it's a custom theme or something like that, I won't take the job. I'll have somebody manually do that's going through each and every file, cleaning it up, making sure it won't be hacked. So mine's a little bit different than what you might do, but if it's custom code, I won't touch it. So I have to have a clean copy of everything they have installed on it. Third thing is sorry, I'm doing this a little bit by memory because I don't have this up, but manually scan the uploads folder for anything that doesn't belong there.
The what folder?
The uploads folder. In other words, was something uploaded to the system that shouldn't have been. Then, of course, I replace all the files. Pretty basic. Enforce password changes for any user that's on there. Typically, I'll actually go as far as deleting a lot of extra user accounts straight from the database. But you want to make sure all passwords are changed. And then that WP config, the salts they call them, you want to replace all those. There's those 6 lines in there, and there's a web address right above them that if you want to regenerate these, here's how you do it. You can replace those quite easily, and it'll, any new password saved will be re-encrypted, so on and so forth. And then, of course, check the database and everything as much as possible. That's depending on the site and what this is. It's typically you don't see issues in the WordPress databases anymore because the files are such an easy target that it's usually not that big a deal. But that's as simple as mine gets in most sites. The types of cleanups I'll do for people, that's as far as I usually need to go. So what it amounts to, replace every file in there, every theme, every plugin. Make sure there's nothing in the uploads folder that doesn't belong there, and make sure all the user credentials are changed.
most of the times I had a website get hacked, it was the end user. Their machine was infected in some way or another. They didn't check their own machine, and they ended up infecting the site from that side of it. And that's kind of the thing, is not scanning the local machines that are interfacing with the WordPress back
You're
now.
talking just about a regular user of the site.
Yeah, a regular user. Yeah.
Well, with somebody logged in typically.
Yeah, they were logged in. They had login.
Not somebody
access to the
just
site, but
browsing.
like, yeah, like they had several pages that had gotten completely rehacked just because of one of those kind of like things like that. Easy to fix. I mean, the backups is the biggest thing is to go back to backups and clean up your user accounts.
I was actually, if you don't mind, I was gonna ask the next question about backups. You mentioned, have a backup and verify. Could you talk about that just a minute, about what your suggestions are about backups?
VaultPress, I think is golden.
WP
VaultPress
Engine's
is
pretty good
automatic.
too.
I'm sorry?
WP Engine spot backups are amazing.
I can be honest, I've never used them. I don't have anybody I've worked with in a
Yeah.
while on WP Engine. But there's a lot of solutions out there. Typically what I recommend is VaultPress.
What is it?
VaultPress.
VaultPress.
It's part of Jetpack. When you get Jetpack from Automatic, they'll tell you to turn on backups. It's, $90 a year or something. The reason I like VaultPress so much is they'll actually ask you for server credentials, and they'll go in behind just the normal ways of doing this. Normally they just do everything over PHP. VaultPress will actually go underneath the PHP and actually try to get a hold of the raw database and stuff. So it's taken a whole lot of complexity out of this backup. And usually, from my experience, it's a much more complete backup. It's a much more reliable backup system. And there's others. Backup Buddy is another great one. There's all kinds of services out there these days. But really, my go-to and the stuff I've used on my own site quite often is VaultPress. Currently, I'm not using it. I use Linode as my host, which does a complete server snapshot. They take the whole server every night. So I don't do the WordPress specific ones. But if you're doing something WordPress specific, that's where I would definitely recommend.
What host was that?
Linode. Linode is, it's a raw, basically they give you just a raw computer, you install the operating system on it, and you configure everything for yourself.
Yeah.
So you might not want to play with that one.
If you're looking for managed, WP Engine does just what he says it does. It does automatic backups. You can do snapshots anytime you want before you make a plugin update or something. There's all kinds. That's not the only one. I mean, there's like a dozen different.
A lot of the good hosts now, I think, really have
Yeah,
those
DigitalOcean does that.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them that are out there that are, listed on the WordPress sponsor sites.
Yeah.
That are really good. WP Engine does do that really well, though. It's a good one for that.
They are one of the only hosts that I know of that puts it in writing on their site that says, if your site gets hacked, they will rebuild your site at their cost.
Who's that?
WP Engine. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, WP Engine.
ENGINE.
People look at it and say, oh my God, they're expensive. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Come down to his database.
No, WP.
Another question back here.
Kind of on the database, I think everybody in this room knows we should be backing up our databases. But if a customer calls you, they're not typically going to be like, yeah, I got my database, I got my files backed up. Like, what would you do in that scenario? I mean, I know this.
Most people that call me know their site. I don't this isn't a service I advertise. And it's not going to be like John was browsing Google and said, hey, let's ping this guy to clean my site. I just don't see that kind of traffic. That's not the type of traffic I want. So it's a little bit easier for me. If I didn't know, just logging in on the back end, looking at the plugins folder, what plugins do they have? Maybe they have VaultPress, or maybe they have Backup Buddy. I look for the name of a good backup plugin, and then I look to see where they're hosted. If they're hosted at a WP Engine, or if they're hosted at one of the SiteGround, or one of the hosts I know has backups.
Backups.
Yeah. So it's a little detective work, but it's usually pretty easy because it's either the host or a plugin, and that's pretty much covers 99% of sites.
And that's something you want to put in your contract too. That's one of those kind of like the mailbox money is the maintenance plans. If you put somebody on WP Engine, then you know that they're going to be doing that. Like I have a client that I don't do a lot of work for, but it's worth it to me to actually put them on a host like that, so I don't have to worry about the backups. I know they're being done.
Right.
It takes one more thing out of the thing.
How do you scan your uploads? How do you do that?
On a small folder, I'll just manually go through each one. When they start getting really large,
I mean, you compare them to the old?
no, I just look for anything that's not a JPEG or a PNG
yeah.
or
Files.
most sites it's only going to be images that they want in there. So if I start seeing something with a PHP extension,
Oh, okay.
or if I see something with an EXE, it's just something that you start looking through anybody's site, you can quickly see what they have. Everything's of one type or another. And I start looking for things that aren't there. Max if you have a Mac or Windows, just searching for different extensions in there can
I
really.
use a tool called Beyond Compare. It allows me to do comparison. It'll compare, pull the folders up, folder, file, whatever, and if it's different, it'll mark it in red.
Sure.
Depends, like you said, if you're doing
Yeah.
onesie twosies, not a big deal, but if you're doing big files, you're doing a lot of them, it kind of helps out.
Exactly. I mean, I write ACT scripts. I typically do them with. There's all kinds of different ways to just scan. But even just for a very simple scan without adding an extra tool, Windows and Mac can both. How do you find a file on Windows or Mac? So you just start searching search that folder for something .php or just something common. Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
And you can very quickly.
They
Oftentimes,
even sort by file type.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but some of that though, once you start getting that hierarchy of 7 years worth of 12 folders per year. But yeah, it doesn't have to be fancy. The catch is just to find something that stands out is really all we're looking for.
Yeah, okay, got it.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. I'm changing.
Oh, sorry.
I haven't thought about that. Okay. We are WordPress St. Petersburg. That means we're a network of the WordPress Tampa Bay area WordPress meetups. We have 6 regional WordPress meetups across the entire Tampa Bay area. This one is WordPress St. Petersburg. If you might have noticed, some of you guys came in through the brand new WordPress meetup website called WordPress St. Petersburg, and some came in through WordPress Tampa Bay area. We are getting ready to split all of our calendars out so that you guys will actually can find things that are local to you. And that's part of our operation, trying to make it a little more organized. We're the team that did the last 3 WordCamps over 2014, 2015, and 2016 over in Tampa. And the goal is we've been spending this year to try to build more community with our WordPress users. And this particular meetup, since we meet at a technical school, we tend to keep it very, not necessarily advanced, but most of the folks that come to this one are developers, they're freelancers, they might be agency owners, they might be small business owners that are building very complicated websites for themselves. And so we tend to be not too friendly on the beginner side. I'm trying to alleviate that some. If some of you folks are actually coming here and needing some beginner stuff, we're going to try to find out for you guys what we can do to help in that kind of area as well. So the meetups here are the first and second Thursday of every month. They run from 6 o'clock to 7:30. We'll be on the calendar all the time. The first meetup of the month is usually a talk, and our second meetups, which we just started, tend to be more of a workshop. They're more informal. We have another one next week, which is about Gravity Forms and custom post types, and kind of like integrating Gravity Forms and MailChimp and segmenting your user list or your mailing list instead of doing like 17 different mailing lists with your MailChimp. So it's just basically going to go into the nitty-gritty of MailChimp and a little bit of the Gravity Form, using Gravity Forms to help you manage that in a more automated way. It's going to be open, so you guys, if you have any kind of questions that you might need help solve, bring them to next week and we'll tackle them. Yeah, go ahead.
Will there be slideshows that will be online?
Yes.
I won't be able to make all these, but I'd like to be able to.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm definitely doing here in the WordPress St. Petersburg area, is I always videotape, well, since like April, we've been videotaping and grabbing the slides for all of our presentations, and we put them online.
YouTube?
No, they'll be on our YouTube channel, yes. But yeah, I mean, I record them locally so that we can actually, edit them and stuff like that. And I think I may actually be out of frame and probably chopping my head off. So anyway.
Could you tell us a YouTube channel so that we can go there and see?
It'll be on our website. Our website, that's what I was getting to very next, is that we have one website for the entire Tampa Bay area. It's called tampabaywp.org. Our YouTube channel, everything is on there. We have a Slack chat, which is a community-based chat that you guys can join on to ask questions. We have a Facebook group, which is members only, so if you have questions, go ahead and join that as well. And we have our meetups, and like I said, we're in the process of splitting all of our little regional groups off onto their own meetup channels, but they're also all going to be on WordPress or Tampa Bay WordPress as well. Anyway, click the slide. And our last one.
I'm not gonna get that.
There we
My
go.
battery.
This place is Iron Yard St. Pete, and they are kind enough to donate this space to us for meetups twice a month. They're amazing. And that nice little says get updated announcement right there. Their next cohort starts on August 28th. That means they are doing another training class. They basically have a very in-depth code class for like front-enders, back-enders, iOS apps, Android apps, Ruby on Rails, Python, the whole bit. They don't teach WordPress, but the tools you learn in that kind of coding can actually help you in the long run with some of the other stuff you might be working on. I know several of their developers actually use WordPress for their database on the back end, and they communicate with it through JavaScript and other things like that through the REST API. So they're a really amazing school. They've got a lot of things that go on here. They have a beginner JavaScript course that they do for free, probably about once a month. Yeah, it's awesome. So definitely join their meetup as well and just see what's going on with what they're doing here. Girls Who Code meet here as well, and they do a lot of beginning coding classes, some front-end classes and stuff like that, so you can learn HTML and CSS. It's an amazing school. And like I said, they provide this great classroom for us for free twice a month. We're also looking for additional hosting spaces. Rick has been kind enough to suggest like the greenhouse again. I'm going to try to do my best to get out to them and see as well. Our new calendar, the new Meetup St. Petersburg, is not just me managing the calendar anymore. If any of you folks want to actually set up a meetup, you want to have like a coffee date and meet up with folks and just talk about WordPress or talk about your website or that kind of thing, or discuss issues you're having, or want to learn some code, or want to, I don't know, just want to get together and co-work for a day, throw a meetup up there, and it'll be visible to the members, and folks might join you.
I'll just add real quick for you too, as they integrate all these changes, if you have WordPress 4.8, it'll appear in your dashboard too.
Yeah, they showed up last night. I was so happy. I was like,
First one.
yeah, I was like so tickled, but like I had to do 3 applications to get us in there. But yeah, that was one of my favorite things. Is like when the 4.8 dropped, and none of our meetups were in there. I said something's wrong, but we weren't part of the chapter program, so now we are, and now we're actually visible. Basically, one of their rules was WordPress meetups had to be city-based. And we had Tampa Bay area, which was an entire region. And we're still keeping that entire region because we all help each other out. It's one of those kind of things. We believe in the idea of community. We believe in the idea of building a really strong technical community here in the Tampa Bay area. And St. Pete has been is becoming a huge tech startup area. So it's one of the best places you can go for like new technology. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you again, as always, for coming out. It really means a lot to us.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.